Good morning. I hope everyone's having a great morning. Start that morning off in a very awesome way. Okay. This little quick video is to really kind of uh explain, I think, in a way that's a lot easier, at least for me, instead of typing it in until more documentation can be written. And that's gonna be a while. I still have to go through, at least 3 libraries, clean them up, make sure they're fully documented. That way, commands actually have documentation for them. As an example, if you go in and take a look at, let's say, this application here, let's make sure I get it to where you can see it. You can go down to a method, and, if the method is where it calls the method, let's find one here like this. You can scroll over it and see where it gives you the breakdown, and it'll give you a little bit of information about that method. I tried to make sure each one of them is documented, so that way you could easily scroll over them and see what they do, the parameters they require, and all of that. I need to get that cleaned up and make sure they're organized. So I tried to group, actually, when I was coding and developing all these different libraries, I just kind of threw them together. It's kind of like, oh, I would be in the middle of doing something. Oh, this idea just popped in my head, or I'm like, oh yes, this kind of idea. Yeah, I can incorporate that, and I threw it in there, and then I would patch meal this application here to be able to utilize the method that I just coded. And that's not the that's not the most structured way to design something, because it means that towards the end of that design period, you're gonna have a whole lot of cleanup work to do. And when you make changes, especially if something is embedded deep in the actual code, in the structure of the code, very low level, then it means that it could break any number of things, because I've coded around the data rather than coding around the process. And that's what happens when you throw things together, when you actually code things on the fly. And I do have a tendency to do that quite a bit. I just code as I think. So I'll just start typing in, yeah, code as I think. But without developing a process first and then laying out that design, the code is wrapped around the data. Now, normally that's not a that's what would, that's what would happen, because you have this kind of data and then you want to present that data in this format, be it a list or, something that the user can see. But if you wrap code around data without coding the process, then that means that you will almost unconsciously manipulate the code to make the data work, rather than making the data represent the process you're trying to do. And then that's going to cause a lot of cleanup in the end. So some of the code I do have to clean up, and that's what I'm working on. All right, so let me show you how this whole thing works. It's very simple. Okay, so this Windows form is an example. So when you click on an item, and it's the exact same system. So when you click on an item, it generates an event. As an example, if you, this is a list view, and if you were to click on these individual items, it one of the events it generates is selected index changed. So every time I select one of these items, I have a selected index change event, and that's a Windows event. So, imagine you have the kernel, which can only accept mouse input from, let's say, a single mouse. Let's just say it's just a single user. And whatever the object is that has focus, that's where the events go. Unless, of course, you're running something in the background. But that's where the input events go. Because, see, I can only do one thing at a time. So either the input events are going into this list, or it's going to this list. And in Windows, you have these different controls, what they call a control. So this is a control, this is a control. This is a list box control. This is a list view. Different types of this is a button control. This is a text box control, and these are button controls. This is a button, and then you have picture box controls. You have this right here is a picture box up here. So you have these different controls, and you have the ability to capture events for those controls, such as if I were to click on this particular picture box, I could, in effect, uh, capture an event for that picture box. So you could click on an image, and then you could throw up a menu here that would say, do you want to save this image? As an example, let's say you have a thumbnail. Or you could do other things. You could select it for processing. So selected index change means that this is the item that now has focus, and I can access the data elements of that list view item. So I can access the text, the actual sub items. So these would be considered sub items. You have the main item and sub item, and it's the structure of the data. Okay. So so Windows generates events for these, but you have to, either when you design the code, when you go over to, let's say here, let's get this down where you can see it. Try to balance it up here. So if you go over to, well, let's see. Yeah, not this one. That one's not a window application. Let me find a window application here. Here we go. So here you have the design. See, and you can see where I just have these. You can place them anywhere because in the code, I move them around. Because a control has properties. It has the text of the property, the location, the XY location, the parent, where the control, who the control belongs to. These controls belong to this form. The name of the control. So there are properties associated with these control elements. So what I did, because you can have controls and you can have event for controls. What I did is I captured these events in an external custom library. It's the utilities library. The same one that's responsible for generating lists and list views. And let me kind of straighten this back up here. List views, these kind of things. It generates all this stuff. Uh, so what I did is I took the most common methods, the most common processes, and I put those in a custom DLL. So I can call them at any time from any program without having to recode those methods over again. The term a long time ago, I don't know if it's still even used today, it was called reinventing the wheel. Programmers would always say, you don't want to reinvent the wheel. You don't want to reinvent the wheel. If somebody else has already done it, then let's go ahead and build on that. Now that's outstanding, improving the code or maybe something that better applies to what, your actual code is trying to do. So outstanding that, don't reinvent the wheel. So that was the idea that's why that utility library is massive because it's like, and I need to over time, I'll probably break it down into multiple DLLs, but for right now, it's just one big lump. And it allows me to very easily manage data without having to put a lot of extra code in. So the most common code, for example, like an example of that would be like a sanity check. I would go in and say, okay, I want to grab an element from this list, but the list is nothing. It's a null reference. So that's going to cause a crash. So I simply make a function that says, here's the list. And if it's nothing, you return an empty list. And I think I call that limit list not nothing. And then I have another one where you can limit a list to not have nothing items in the list. You can strip that out. So it's kind of like sanity checks. And these, because they're functions, they can be called anywhere in any program, in any application to give it, to harden it up a little bit from crashes. Okay. So so we know we have controls and we know we have events. So what I did was in the utilities library, I created custom I created events. So it takes the exact same parameters as a Windows event, but it's not automatically assigned to the control. You have to add the handler to the control, and then it will generate those events. So for those controls that I add the handler to, and a handler is just something that gets called when certain things happen to a control. That's what generates the events. Kind of very similar to how the Papyrus does it. So when I click on this object, this particular list view, this is assigned a custom handler to catch the events. Now I could have simply when I was designing it, I could simply go in and double click on the control and it will give me the event. But it's going to give me the code for an event. But there's many events that can happen. You can have, for example, here I can have mouse down, mouse up. And then I can have selected index changed. I could have an event that says I need to redraw this element, something changed like the text. So you have many, many different events. So I capture specific events. So in this particular list view, I literally say I want to capture mouse down, mouse up. And when I do, I go through a certain code check and I set up data structures. So this right here becomes a focus point data structure or a data element, if you want to call it that. And in this application, and actually in the utility library, there is a database. You have a database of internal items, and this is completely user controlled. It's not anything that's but if the database exists, whenever you click on these items, it will utilize that internal database. So in effect, what it does is it links different data structures together. So, as an example, let's say this is an available folder and this has a folder name. That's an actual folder name. So, when you click on this, there's an internal database that says, oh, he's, me, the programmer has provided a data point, a data link to this folder. So when I click on it, the event says, okay, you've clicked on an item. This is the event that I'm looking for, found it. And now I'm going to go through the custom code you've provided, and it sets up certain data structures, such as that data element, that database element. So not only do I have access to this element, but I also have access to the database entry that contains even more information on that folder. From there, I create a function code. So in these applications, basically what I did is I created it's a queue. It's like what they call a pipe. It's just a queue. And the functions have a specific format. So, you have the function code or the operation code, and then you have the operation parameters, and then you have certain data structures also of that function code, such as a list or an object, different types of objects. So, in its simplest form, you have an operation code and the parameters that you want to pass to it. So when I click on this, whether it's mouse down, mouse up, or in effect, if I'm going to do like a control S and then see how it says save, that was a key down, key up. That's the events that this captures. And on all controls can capture these events. Some controls don't need them, others do. Like at buttons, I could probably do a key down event, but I don't really see the need for that. But it's there if you want to use it. And some controls do not have those events from a Windows-based standpoint. They simply do not have those events. So once I capture that event, I reformat it, and then I add that to a queue. It's first in, first out. It's a FIFO queue. So the first one in is going to be the first one out, meaning that if you stack 10 in there real quick, it's always going to start from the first one down. And this pipe, actually, it's a single pipe and it handles both events and then it handles requests. It's the same exact format for the function. It's a data structure that I fill in the fields, throw it in the queue, and then it's up for the queue processing code to decide what to do with it. Now, the optimum design for that would be multiple pipes, where you have one pipe that is strictly for events, and they have a higher priority than, let's say, a regular request pipe. You know, a request pipe is, for example, I'm going to do a Control S, and I want to save it, right? Or I'm going to right click, and I'm going to bring up a menu. So that would, the menu would probably be an event queue that would have priority over, let's say, doing a Control S to save, because saving is it doesn't require immediate kind of a response. But I did try to build in at least an initial design, and it's just kind of like, okay, I've got an idea, let's top down code it, and then we'll play around with it later. So it's kind of an initial design, and it does have it can, I tried to make it as tight as possible, but there's a lot of different things built in, which can add, some microsecond delays. But one of the things I added was, a burst. So once it detects that there's messages there, when there, well, not messages, but when there's functions queued up, when there was requests queued up, it actually grabs the whole block. And you can decide how many you wanna grab in one shot, so it lets you kinda tone that down. So if you have, like, 1,000 requests sitting in a queue, you can grab them 10 at a time or 20 at a time. They're still sequentially processed, but it doesn't put a delay in there when it actually tries, because it's what they call a polling. It kinda polls, meaning that there has to be a delay in there, otherwise your CPU is just gonna, the utilization, is gonna go nuts. Okay. So anyways, back to what I was saying. So I capture the event, and then I format it into a function code, an operation code. And then that operation code is put into the pipe, the opcode pipe. It's the just a pipe. So once the main line, once the main polling realizes that there are requests queued up, it will start processing those requests. Now, what this allowed me to do, the reason I chose this design, is I can literally create a request from anywhere. I can create a request from a script. I can have custom scripting. I can create a request from a menu. That's what these are. So if I was to click on open location, that's exactly what that did. That put a request into that pipeline, and it basically said, I'm good. The operation code is open folder, and the parameter is the folder name. And that's pretty much how that system works. But I chose it so that way I could send an operation code through many different things. I could even have multiple opcodes if you want to do more than one step. So I could allow it in configuration files. So as an example, in one of the features of the main app, which is built into the libraries, because remember, this main application is generally an interface into the library calls. One of the features is you can have an installation file, just like you would have a faux mod, your mod config XML. You can have an install info, and in there, you can have a lot of information because it's broken down by XML tags. So you can have as much information as you want to code into it. But it also allows me to script, to put in that just text file operation codes that I want to execute. And then I can then load that tag up, grab those little text lines, and add them to that operation queue, to that request queue. So it gave me a central pipe that I could easily put things into. Another reason for that type of design, that type of pipeline design, it provides an interface to the code. So libraries have certain methods, but you can't, for the end user, without writing the code, for the end user, they can't really access those methods directly. The pipe, the request pipe gave me that ability to link a function code to a method. That way, if the method is, let's say, again, we're going to do a save, Control S save. See where it says save. So it gave me the ability to access a save load order method in the load order library. So when I did Control S, it said, okay, you press the control key. So the modifier key is control. You press the S. That's key down. Or key up. You can get it when you actually, release the key. And then it generated that event, which was a normal Windows event. I caught that event, and then I put it I reformat it into an opcode, and then I throw that in the pipe. The pipe says, "Oh," because I take events, like an event could be mouse down, but I convert that to, let's say, an 865. So operation code 865 means mouse down. All I need to know is what's the target of mouse down. And that's really all I need to know. What is the object, the sender? What was the sender? What received that data? What received that mouse down event? So, um, so like I say, one of the nice things about it is it gave me an interface to those methods and allowed me to combine those methods into a more complicated function, and then simply give the user the ability to call it at any time they want. So that gave me the ability to have a one-click change. So we're going to go up here. Let's do a one-click change. So by clicking this button, I can literally call an operation code, which opens another game. And that's what you see here. It opens the game. Of course, it is multi-threaded, so you can have things running from the previous game in the background. But that's what that gives me the ability to do. You can, like I say, so to me, it was just a more simple way to say. I tried to simplify it by saying no matter what the user does, it's always a request for something. You're requesting data, you're requesting to open a game, you're requesting to open a load order, you're requesting to play the game, to click play, you're requesting something. So let's give it all a common format, and then let's just put it in one giant request pipe, and then we can process it sequentially. So that's kind of like how that process worked. Okay, so now that you kind of know that process,
Let's get to
capture.
modding.
All right, let's switch back. Capture window event. So we captured a window event, we reformat it, we throw it in a queue, and then we process it through a queue. So now that you know that, you know that I can, you know that not me personally, but like the system, the code can actually capture events. So one of the events it can capture is a button press. So let's go ahead and fire this off here. Let's just go ahead and compile this real quick. I put a new version up. I went ahead and add the button code to it and a few other little fixes. But let's just bring this up. And right now it's actually looking at my load order. So as you can see, there is a new button up here, and this is defined by the user. So to show you real quick, let's just take you through this real fast. It's not complicated. Trust me on that. All right, let's do, because I like to keep things simple. It's not only for everybody else, it's for myself too. It makes it easier to go in and change. So you see where you have add user controls. All right, so when you add user controls, what you're looking for, and I'm going to try it. Let me get this. I'm going to have to try to bounce these back and forth. Since I'm only showing a very small window, I got to make sure you can actually see it. Okay, so inside the ini file for the application, you have a tag called controls. See, just a tag called controls. And this is the control definition right here. The location doesn't matter because I'm going to show you why here in a minute. But if I didn't set the location of the control, this is where it's going to appear on its parent. The parent being the form. The parent is actually this form right here. That's the parent. And that's actually coded into the program because I don't want to try to link parents back to forms. I literally could say parent, and then you give a form name, and then I can look that form up, and then I can grab the parent that way. And I might do that But for right now, this is just more or less something that a user can code. This would be coding.
Let's get to modding.
So there's the button. It basically says I want to create a new control, and I'm going to show you that here shortly. But what just to start out with, it just loads these entries. So this gets loaded up, and this gets loaded up here. Let's go back to the code real quick. It gets loaded up right in here. There's where it gets loaded. So to start out with, whenever I load a configuration file, I load it in an array list. So I need a target for that list. There's the target for the list of items. This is the button that I'm going to use as the base positioning for buttons I'm going to add, which is the plugins button. That's this button right here. I want to use that one as the base. So just to show you the code, the end user wouldn't normally see this, but I'm going to show you how simple it is. So I need to load the configuration file. That's the ini file that's the name of the ini file for the application. That tag is in that localization file. So tag 155, just to show you. So tag 155 over here. Well, it's actually, I think, just give me a second. I believe, yeah, there's no, if you look, let me show you real quick. So if you look over here at this, you'll see towards the end of that list in light blue, you'll see dictionary name. That's the localization dictionary that I'm asking to use. Here, it doesn't have it. So that means it's going to go back, it's going to default. Uh, yeah, having a smaller screen means I got to do a lot of these flips. So be patient. So I have to go back to the default library, which is here. And I think it was what, tag 155? So you see right here, this is where it gets the name of the tag. And it's in a tag record. And like I say, you can do this. If you want to put a space in here, you can do that too. It actually can actually deconstruct both formats. But that's where it gets that from. So let's go back over here to our configuration ini. All right, let's bounce out of this. Let me bring back the code. All right, make sure I think we're good. We're squared. Okay, so there's the file. That's the tag data, and that's the target for the list. That's going to contain the items. And this right here literally says, I want to get the tag items. Now, if you want to get tag names, it would pick up all tags within that tag. But we don't, we want the actual data inside that tag. And then here's what we're doing. We are enumerating each item, and this is just the name I give each item. You enumerate each item in that list. This is where it parses. This is the library command in the utilities library to parse this text file right here. This line of text, it parses that out. So it creates a new button control. It sets the name property to button 1. That's the text that you see in the button. That's the anchor, and then the location. So the anchor would mean that the button is actually going to be anchored to the left and top. So if you go to if you go to resize the window, this button will stay right in that position. If you anchor it to the right, it's going to move when the window is resized back to the right. Okay. So first thing we got to do is we got to get the control. So now the design the control method actually returned a control. Now, one thing I am going to put in here, which I didn't do, is I'm going to put in a check to see if it is if it's a valid control. If it's nothing, then I need to skip to the next one. So I do need to put an edit check right in here. And I'll do that for the next release. So all I do is I check to see if it's a button. If it's a button, I need to add that custom event that I was referring to. However, that event is in the main application. It is in this application here because, you can see there's no library reference to it. And then I add the button height to itself. I'm moving it down and I add 4 to it. So it basically puts a little gap right in here in between the buttons. So I'm moving I technically, it would have moved it down right below here, but then I add 4 to it, and it moves it down a little bit more, and I still keep the same X location. So the X doesn't change, and I wanna make sure that the width and height of the button is the same as this button here. So now you have the button and you have the event. So the application, oops, let me grab the right one here. There we go. So the application actually, does all that for you. So now you have the event. So once I click on this button, you'll see where it pops up and says bad opcode. So once I click on this button, so you can just keep doing it, it caught the event and it routed the button click, the event, to a function inside of this application. And then this application will decide whether you've right clicked or left clicked, because a left click would equate to a menu. So if you right click, what it does, and I won't look at all that code to keep this video kind of smaller, but we can look at that stuff later. But when you click on it, what it does is it actually looks into the configuration file. It looks into this file right here. Let's get this up here. And it looks for it'll load again, it loads a buttons. This is where direct buttons are declared. So it loads the button tag up, and then it says, remember the name of the button? So it'll actually look up the name of the button. And because that's what we declared up here. Oh, there's it down here. See, button name, button 1. So right up here is the name of the button. And then that is what we want to that's the opcode that gets executed. And the reason I did it this way is because you can have opcode, op. You can have a bunch of them. It can do a bunch of different things, not just execute a single command. And this puts the scripting ability, or the ability to create a custom command in the hands of the user. So uh, I've already used this pipeline code enough, plus I wrote it, so I'm kind of familiar with it. But as an example, if you want to execute a program, so let's say you want this to execute a program, the function code for that is 65. It's opcode 65, and these are the parameters that you would want to look at. And I already know what the parameters are, but I tried to document them as much as I could. There's still a lot more documentation to go, so let's take a look. So you can see opcode 65 has start a program or assembly, and there's the parameters that you can pass to it. The first parameter is either this is a user prompt, so it's either a user prompt or the program you want to start, the parameters you want to pass to that program, and then a working folder name, and they are separated by commas. The fields are separated by commas. So if you have a comma in a parameter, you need to put that in quotes. So you would just simply put quotations. Let me find our quotation key like this. And then you can have a comma, because I actually parse it out. That was that code that was giving me a headache for a while. And then you simply call this, you simply queue that opcode up. It's in the pipe, and then as it processes the pipe, it says, "Oh, he has function code 65." So I know the program, and these are relative positions. Not relative, these are absolute, these are explicit positions. Some things like flags can be not, it's not relative, it can be anywhere in the list, but it does look for parameter 0 or the first parameter to be the program, second parameter, like that. And so that's what it does. So if you notice, this is where it checks for a prompt and then prompts the user. See user prompt. And this is the same structure for almost every single function. I try to keep everything very consistent. So is the program name valid? See, that's the 0 element. It's 0 relative, so that would be this element here, okay, which is the program name, right? So Valid means it can't be blank, it can't be nothing, and also, is it a valid program? Is the file name valid? It can't have a bunch of weird characters in it and things like that. The next thing it does, it checks to see if the file exists. And then there is, and these are all library calls. So, does the file exist? So, when you pass it the name of the file, it needs to be the full file name. It can't be a partial name. Now, there is another function I have in here. There's another operation code that allows Windows to kind of decide, but you want to be careful with that. So, the next thing it does, it checks to see, these are all like library calls. It checks to see if it's an executable assembly. And then it checks the extension to see, does it end in a normal extension. So you really shouldn't be able to start an executable that doesn't end in .exe. And that keeps from that's just a little simple edit check for the very basic kind of, I put an executable as a picture, you shouldn't be able to run that. And you should never see that. But there are those that do that kind of stuff. Okay, so to the next thing. You actually have a configuration file. I included it with the package to show you. Well, let's see if I can find it here. I don't think I have it up and running. I do not. Okay. So, let me get that down. There we go. All right. Yeah, I was watching, I think I was watching the thing. Okay. So, anyways, back to what I was saying. So this actually, you can configure where you do not want to be able to start applications, and it won't allow this function to continue. It'll exit out. Otherwise, it tries to retrieve the program information. You can actually define program information in the program. There's a program control file. I haven't included it yet. Because I haven't had the need to. It's all that's coming, so it's all gonna filter in time. But if you take a look, there is a program control. Let's see if we can find it here really quick. Program control. So there is a program control file. So anytime it sees explorer.exe, you can define absolute paths for certain things, and you can define parameters for certain things. So, like, for example, Chrome can be started in a certain location, certain path. Here is certain parameters for loot. Remember, like loot.exe. So this tells, the registry entry for the path, and that way I can find the install path for it and all that. So there's a program control file that's specifically associated with programs. And it says, okay, do you have this defined in the program control? And then it calls a library function called simple task. And you could do a lot with this simple task. It can actually capture the output. You can wait for it to be done. You can do lots of different things. So I pass the parameters to that simple task. And here you can see another one of those limits. I don't want to limit the string not, limit string not empty means that if it's empty, I'm going to try to look for the path. If the path doesn't exist, then if nothing exists, then I'm going to substitute the parameter, the program name that you execute, because if it's declared in program control, those things will override. And then I pass this is, I think, the parameters that go to it. And then, of course, 2 is the working folder, as you can see. So get directory name, we're going to get the working folder name. And this is a library function that says, if that entry doesn't exist, if the second parameter doesn't exist, you're going to default. This is the default. And you can see where it says item index, and then text is the default. And then you just simply launch it. That's what this does. This runs it. If everything goes okay, it'll run it. Otherwise, it'll report an error. Then I simply make sure that it's not nothing. If for some reason it couldn't start, because you can see that's the return. You can see it returns a process info structure. So if it's nothing there, because I don't want a null reference hit, then I'm going to exit out. Otherwise, I need to check to see when it's done. If it's done, then I queue up. This is what I was talking about. So there is a function in the pipe which allows me to check to see if something has completed okay if it completed successfully. And if it doesn't, it will throw up the output of that task. This is what I was referring to. So instead of recoding it and then calling it, because I could have called it, because I know where it is, I could literally call it with a method call. I went ahead and called it. I defined a function code like this right here, and then I pass parameters to it. And it's a little extra step, it's a little extra layering. So you are gonna get you're gonna add a little bit of processing time and maybe milliseconds, very, very minute amount of time depending on how much stuff gets stacked. And that's what you see over in here where you can't really see it because I'm not really showing that part of the screen. But, there's a little thing over there. If you remember when I used to throw up the full screen, there was a queue size, and that shows how many actual queued up items exist. And that's it. That's how that works. And this is the one I was telling you about. See, this does a process start, which allows Windows to decide what to do. This one is something that you want to exercise caution with because, for example, if you call an opcode 66 on an HTML document, it's going to open that document with your default browser. That's what happens when you click on things. It basically does a process. It can call a process start. But, if you notice, there's nothing in here that says, I don't have any code in here that actually says, do you want to allow that process to start? So that one you do want to be careful with. But other than that, that's how the whole system works. So back over to here. So whenever you clicked on that button, it says, okay, I'm capturing the Windows event. I'm going to generate a function opcode for that Windows event, throw it in the queue, request queue. Request queue is always polling itself. Oh, I got a request in here. It's for a button click. So now let's process it accordingly. And that's what opcode. So this would be the full program name. So let's say it's C, it had to be the full program. Like let's say it's C loot, as an example, loot.exe. And you can put that in quotes if you want. If you do have to have quotes in something, you have to double quote it. And that was where I had a major headache trying to parse out quoted stuff. For some reason, I think I made it more complicated than it had to be. So the parameters would be whatever you want to pass to this. So for example, let's say you were running, I don't know, I can't even think of the name of it right off. It's classic buff out something. So let's just whatever it's called. Let's just call it classic buff out log exe. And then you want to pass whatever the name is that you're currently using. So for these applications, you would use a substitution parameter, and they always start with a $sign and they're in braces. And these are defined by the application. These are coded into the application. So to add or remove some of these, that's going to require a code change. But for that would be file name like this. And you probably, if that needs to have quotes on it. So if there's spaces, like for example, if this has CBL V1 and there's a space in here, then you're going to need to do this. You're going to have to double quote it. Because when I split the parameters off, I automatically remove the first pair of quotes, meaning that is what you will see. But for program names, you really don't have to worry about that. What you do have to worry about is parameters. So if a parameter has a space in it, like the file name has a space, you will have to do this to double quote it. And that's it. That's all there is to it. So whenever you click on that button, it's going to try to run this program. Of course, now this program doesn't exist, so if we save it, let's see, I might have to actually reload it, but let's see. Yeah, see, program doesn't exist. So that program does not exist, so it can't run it. And that's all there is to it. And that is how you can, the end user, because this is already in here, so you can just simply add a change however you want. And you can add buttons. So if you go down over here and let's say you add another button, You don't have to put any indexes. You just put button number. Whoops, not that. Let's grab this. So let's say you put button number 2. We're going to call it button number 2. Button number 2. Now for this, you will have to restart this application. So you're going to have to restart it. And when you do, hopefully, if I don't have a bug in here somewhere, and give it a second to fire up, you should now see button number 1, button number 2. See, that's all you have to do to add that. Let me go ahead and take that out since we only want one as an example. And that's it. If you give it the same name, like if you go over here and you give it, like, see where I had the same name. If I don't change this to a 2, it's always going, that's the name of that control. So when it goes to look up who the target for the event is, it's always going to be, let me get this line back up. It's always going to be this right here. It's always going to, whoops, it's going to be this right up here. It's always going to be this. But that's pretty much all there is to it. It's very it seems kind of complicated, but it's actually very simple. The program kind of really does most of it for you. But this way you can add custom buttons to any of these forms. Well, the ones that support it. This is just something I just now put in. So it's going to be things like this. It'll be things like this. The buff out log utility has these buttons. Papyrus log utility has these buttons. So it's going to be something like this. And this way you can put as many buttons and you can launch as many different programs as you want to launch. There are certain substitution parameters, because when you do something like this right here, the application knows you're wanting to substitute the current file name, which in this case, I don't believe this one actually has a file name. But, because this is more or less looking at, this would be looking at conflicts. Whereas if you're talking about a buff out log, file name would be the name of the current buff out log you're looking at. But there are some that are currently built in, such as app path, app name, things like that. Some are automatically set when you select an item, such as it'll have like a target name, it'll have like a target BSA. So those are automatically set by the library. So if you were to click on a plugin, for example, if it's flagged a certain way, it will save that information. It'll actually create the file. For example, if you click on a plugin, it's a file name. If it's flagged as a file name, it'll automatically put in a substitution parameter dictionary the current file name, which is the target that you're clicking on. And that way you can pass that as a program name to anything. So you could go over to, let's say, this application. Let's bring up, I want to see, well, this one would be fine. So let's do plugins. So when I click on, this is a file name. So if I click on this, this becomes the target. So I can call another function passing either the file link, which is another substitutional parameter with a different format, which is a %sign f link. Those are hard coded. So f link is always file link. I link is whatever the link is. It doesn't try to extract a file name from it. And then you have a few more. You can actually do fields. So if you know there's fields in here, you can actually specify this field name, which I think it's a %sign I for indicators, or I think I is index. I'm not sure what indicators are, but N, for example, is either N for name or D for display name. And usually name is the full name of the plugin and display name is usually the shortened name. That would be, this would be, so if you wanted the full name, you would pass a %sign N, and then if you want the shortened name, you would pass %sign D for display name. So you can pass certain fields. It allows you to pass field parameters to and from, or even substitutional parameters to and from functions. So if I click on this, this now becomes the target. That's how when I go in and I take a look at, let's say, plugin masters, it knows what to show me the plugin master for. It needs to, this way it shows me which one that is the target for whatever the function is. And that way each operation code can have a target to work on, a target data or a data structure. So that's pretty much how that whole system works. It's really it's I think I simplified it as much as I could, and I think I've taken as much out of programming, requiring coding changes and put that into the hands of the user to where you can change menu icons like these icons, they're in the images folder. You just put new images in there and you can change these. This is a theme. I'm gonna go ahead and include, the Fallout 3 color scheme I use in the theme, and the same for Fallout Vegas, but that's what this is. The theme system, I've got a few forms over here that are they don't have the proper colors, so there's still some bugs in there I have to work out. I haven't even got to the theme system yet, that's way down the line. 'Cause there's just so much code to go through. I have to kinda go through and clean up, certain classes such as lists or items. I think I did the compression class last, I think it was. I've gotta work on it. So I have to take all my classes, and then some classes are so big, I have to, make sure they're documented, it makes sense. A lot of times I threw this stuff together, and it's like, I have no idea what I was doing, so I have to kinda reabsorb and redigest all of that, that code so that way I make sure it's documented properly, and that way it's easy to use, and not only for myself, but for anyone else who might wanna use it. Alright, so I think that kinda shows you how to use that in an example. This video's probably gone on way, way, way too long, but I just kinda wanted to show you how that is and how the system works. It's fairly simple. I've put as much in in the user's pocket as I could, and very little programming. As long as the function codes exist in the pipe, then you can call those at almost any time. And yeah, that's pretty much it. All right, well, I'm gonna hop off here and get my morning started. Definitely brew me some coffee here in the back. And, yeah, I'll check back in later and, see how everybody's doing. I got some more coding I need to do, and I got some cleanup work I have to do. So I'm gonna kinda work on these programs as I go. I kinda threw them together. It's kinda like a place marker in my mind. Okay, it's here, it's here. I put this stuff in, it's here. Now I have to go back and revisit it, and then I need to add more functionality or get it like the FOMod utility, actually get it to do what it's supposed to do. So, yeah, all that's coming. All right. Well, I'm gonna hop here and I will chat with everyone later. Hope you have a great morning and great afternoon.